Welcome to another episode of Industrial Strength Podcast, a podcast more focused on the industrial fire departments and the industrial hazmat response. Once again, I'm Jeff, the hazmat technician, 20 years experience in the fire department and 10 years with that being in the industrial side. With me, once again, are Randy and Steve.
That's right. I'm Steve, hazmat technician with almost 4 years of experience on the industrial response team and 10 plus years of service in the manufacturing industry overall.
Perfect. Yeah, and if you don't recall, my name is Randy, hazmat specialist, 17 years on industrial fire department, mainly doing hazmat.
Hi, Randy.
So, feels like an intervention. I'm just saying, that kind of vibe. But, so when we left off, this is
I think one.
Yeah, I think this is our first two-parter, and we're coming back for this is part 2. So I don't think we did a two-parter yet.
Yeah, so. We have.
Did we?
Rail cars.
That shows how good my memory is. I'm just saying. Well,
so,
this is another
actually,
two-parter.
This is an intervention for you now.
I guess, man. Tripped into that one.
Third one, because I think we did one on it's an assessment, not an audit, too.
Oh,
golly.
That's a good call.
Yeah.
Got that old-timer's disease. All right. Fair enough. So what are we talking about again today, guys?
We're going to talk about peroxide formers, and last time we covered some of the more scientific side behind it.
Yeah.
Now I think we're going to start covering a little more of the emergency response action once arriving on scene.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, because we covered a lot of the literature stuff about peroxide formers and different classes they fall into. So, but now, yeah, I think it's a little more hands-on stuff that we're going to cover. So when we left off, I think we were going to talk about how to do a visual inspection on a suspected bottle of peroxide-forming chemicals. So you guys want me to kick off?
If I do remember correctly, peroxides are stored in a brown bottle, correct?
Yes. Yes, that's true because they can be UV active. So some form just by light hitting it. So that brown bottle will stop the correct wave of UV light from hitting it and forming peroxide. So yeah. So it is a brown bottle for sure. So
is that one of my favorite liquids come in brown bottles?
I know.
Most of them do.
Yep. Especially ones that are brewed in the Rockies.
I love it. Banquet time. So those peroxide formers are stored in bottles, right? And so performing that visual inspection, you have to pay close attention to the bottle you're working with. So because obviously that amber bottle is going to kind of make it harder to see sometimes the contents of the bottle. You always got to be worried about the peroxide solids if there are any, because if they formed, it's a solid, it's going to be shock sensitive, right? So we want to make sure that when we're doing our inspection first, you don't pick it up and move it. We'll talk about that later.
Pick it up and shake it violently, right?
No, but you know what? First-hand experience, that happened once. We'll talk about that. Never more did my butthole pucker. I kid you not. So very rarely does the job make me nervous. That made me super nervous. But yeah, so obviously, visual inspection, we want to look at the bottle without touching it, handling it too much, because any solids in there are shock sensitive. So we want to make sure that when we do look, we're looking for indications of solids in there. Yeah, I know I said solids about 1,000 times. So what is it going to look like, right? So initially, when it's low level, like less than 100 parts per million in that bottle, you're not going to see anything. But once you start getting over 100, you're going to start seeing things like wispy formations, almost like cotton candy. And then you're finally going to see like ice-like structures, crystals, or solids. And they can form anywhere. So if the bottle's never been opened, it'll tend to form probably around as much of a corner as you can get, so the bottom of the bottle. But you got to be careful, because if that bottle's ever been opened, it can also form in things like the threads of a cap. Now, if I'm not mistaken,
is that
I think
typically where you see that, Randy? For the beginning,
it can be, yes.
Like the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, because that's where you're going to get the peroxide solvent to dry out first, the quickest, is any residual solvent in those threads. So it's going to be the first place where it can dry out and kind of have that action. Because once again, as we talked about in the last episode, one of the things how you can get peroxide to form is through evaporation. And so, yeah, once you open and close that cap, if you pour anything out of that bottle, you're always going to get a little bit of liquid on the threads of the cap. And then once you reseal it, that's where it's going to dry out first. So there's going to be a problem there. But like I said, I think we had a picture to show about peroxide solids in a bottle. I think. Fingers crossed. But if we do, great. We will bring that up. What we had a picture of is peroxides in a Class B peroxide. It was like THF. And this is a case study actually we're going to cover later. But it was a bottle that had sat around for a while. And what you saw, if you did this visual inspection, was a golf ball sized white solid in the bottom of a bottle. There we go.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. And that was some sassy business there, because that golf ball sized solid, you need to stop thinking about it like a bottle of THF and more like an improvised explosive device. Because if you move that wrong, that's what's going to happen. And it turns out that there was, a very big kaboom. Then not only that, but the solid is explosive, and then all that THF in there is flammable. So you really have a pretty good incendiary device hanging out there on that countertop. But once again, as you can see in the images, just by looking at the bottle, you may not notice the solids, but once you kind of come around to the side, you can definitely see something that's not the same color at the bottom of the bottle, and that was for sure our solids. And so once again, those are decent sized chunks, and that bottle itself from that image, that bottle had been sitting around for 5 years, so I had 5 years to develop that amount. So it was pretty serious. But so you might see something like that in your visual inspection. If you do, that's like serious call to hazmat team. Don't touch that kind of stuff. But that is seriously took a long time to develop that amount of solids. More often than not, it's going to be more wisp like. Or sometimes pins and needles type of crystals. So
it'll be more like a snowflake.
Yeah. Look at this image here. So in this second image, what you see is a bottle with the crystals under the cap. And so once again, that's from opening, pouring out. That solvent evaporates, and then through that evaporation, you can form the peroxide solids. Or in that bottle, you see the image to the right. You get the crystalline solids. Like I said, the wisps are starting to condense on the bottom of that bottle. These little needle-like crystals, which will eventually form that golf ball.
Looks a lot like my windshield did yesterday.
From natural weather patterns?
Yes.
Yeah. Boo. So whenever you're doing a visual inspection of a bottle, always use caution, right? So before you ever pick it up or handle it, always visually inspect it first before you touch it. Check that bottom of the container, the sides of the container, if the bottle's ever been opened, the threads, and then sometimes the outside of the container. For visual indicators, you might be having a problem. Right? So those are key things to look for. Once again, like I think we mentioned in the last episode, anything higher than 80 parts per million of peroxides can be an explosive mixture. So,
all right. So what's 80 parts per million in a bottle that size?
Great question. There is no good way to visually tell. So how would we tell that?
I was just thinking out loud. I'm like,
yeah, right. No, it's a perfect way to ask that question, because it's hard to give that visual estimation, right? So kind of like there are other things where it's hard to get a good range on it, or like the color intensity of something, right? So there's charts for everything. So like, how would we tell how much if we didn't see any solids? No visual indications, no crystals or crusting or bulging, anything like that to indicate possible side formations of this peroxide solid. I think we have ways of testing this. I know in the lab scale, and on our team, we have ways of testing for peroxide solids. So I think something that's more common to most hazmat teams, at least they should be very familiar with it, is so peroxides are like a version of hydrogen peroxide, and hydrogen peroxide is at heart an oxidizer, right? So if you just wanted a simple yes-no test, you can always hit that liquid with KI paper, which most hazmat teams should be very familiar with, right? So you hit that KI paper, touch it, and then once again, color chemistry. You got some oxidizers, which would be your peroxide. It's going to change color for you. If not, it doesn't. Hunky dory. But that's a yes or no. That's not a parts per million evaluation. So
Correct. You're just saying that whether you have that in there or not. So
yeah. But what do we have, Jeff, for when we need to know parts per million, right? So let's say it came back yes, but now it's, okay, oops, it's a yes. How do we know how dangerous this is?
well, we do have some testing strips. The Insta-Test, it's a low-range hydrogen peroxide test strip. It's a really easy way. Kind of like how you check your hot tub for chlorine to just dip it in.
Yeah. Yep, agreed. Yeah, it's a lot like
And
we
then
have
you
some
just-
pH
you
paper that way too.
compare. Yeah, you just compare. Yeah, there you go. You compare it with a chart on the side. It gives you a very rough guesstimate of where you are at on that. So
Yep, but it lets you know whether you're in trouble or not, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then but I think there's like 3 different kinds of that dip strip test. So it matters a little bit because sometimes those peroxides can be an organic solvent or a water-based solvent, right? And one test strip isn't good for everything, if I remember right. So
Yeah. And you got to know what you're looking for, too, because some of those strips you got to actually water wet them before you test versus just dry dipping.
right, yeah, and that goes back
you're right.
almost to like pH paper too, right? Some pH papers you have to activate before you use it. So, but yeah, similar technology, similar idea, but I don't know how many other people know about the parts per million like dip paper. Right? I'm sure a lot of people know about KI because it's part of bear claws everywhere, right? You've been taught that since you went through tech school, if you went through tech school. Because some people don't, right? Because going down range and fixing a problem is a tech level skill, and you might be operations level. You might not know about some of these things.
Sure.
But they're definitely handy tools to have, and they're relatively cheap to get your hands on. KI paper, super cheap. The peroxide dip strips, they can be a little bit more expensive, and some of them, like some of the ones they can use in labs, have to be refrigerated too. And if you don't, the test pad doesn't work correctly. It like expires, and so it becomes a problem.
So you have to almost be specifically trained on those strips themselves.
Yeah, you kind of should, because if not,
Kind of a one-off. I mean, I would imagine labs would probably have that.
Yeah, I think like in the company we work in, some of the labs do have these test strips, and there's like a user guide for it, so you know what you have to do, whether depending on if it's in a water solution or organic solvent solution, and if it has to be refrigerated or not. There's all those warnings on there, so that way you can't accidentally grab the wrong one, get a false positive or false negative, right? Because it's trying to drive to being safe.
So I know the ultimate question out there is there pictures involved? Nobody's going to do the reading. It needs pictures.
Well, I know where we work, I made a picture guide because, once again, Randy likes pictures. It makes life easier. So a picture worth 1,000 words.
Pictures.
I know.
No.
But ironically enough, just like the peroxide-forming solvents are stored in amber bottles, a lot of times in the industry, you'll find the actual container that these strips come in put inside of an amber bottle too, inside of that refrigerator or wherever they're being stored.
Yeah, you can. So some can be, and some are kept in solid metal tubes for the same reason, right? So light doesn't expose it, because you're right. Sensitive chemicals, light will kind of destroy it. That UV will ruin it. So, and that's a big difference between that and like the pH test strips or pool test strips. So UV light's not going to screw with it too much, but the peroxide test strip's 100%. So let's say let's walk down this road a little bit. Let's say you did a visual inspection, and because someone found a bottle that's, well, how about this? This is a very recent thing at work that happened this week. I had someone come to me and say, "Hey, look, man, I got 6 bottles of a peroxide former, and they're 2 years old. What do I do?" ... Like new person at work.
Hurry up and use them real quick.
Yeah, exactly. So my first question was, have they ever been opened? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, good. I like the answer. That's good. So then the next thing we did. What's that?
Shake them up first.
Yeah, exactly. Now, so what we did, the next thing was we did that visual inspection, right? So we did it in place, and there were no solids, which is beautiful. You know, it's kind of what you're hoping for in that visual inspection. And then with no solids and no visual indications that crystallizations occurred, the bottles were opened. And then what we did next is we hit it with the peroxide strips to kind of see what would happen, right? To see if we had any levels of peroxides. And luckily, in our case, none of the 6 bottles had any peroxides. They all came back at zeros, which is phenomenal. Right? A great outcome. But what happens when they don't, right? We've had times where potential peroxide formers come back, you know, without solids, but with a peroxide level, right? Let's say it's less than 10. What do you do? Let's say it's less than 20 and still safe to handle. What do you do? So are there any ways to neutralize this stuff, right? So, and, you know, funny enough, there are chemical ways of taking care of this without it being an issue. So.
Yeah, and it's, I think, believe it or not, one of the same neutralization chemicals that we've talked about in a couple other episodes that tends to work on a lot of different things.
Which one's that?
Well, you got sodium metabisulfite and sodium bisulfite both.
Yeah.
I think we talked about those in the bromine episode as well.
We did.
Yeah. So common chemical reagents work pretty well. I know we've also used iron 2 sulfate on site, and we'll talk about that example very specifically a little later. That goes into one of the case studies we're going to talk about, but that's also can be used as a neutralization agent. I also know that sometimes you can use dilution to solve that problem too, right? So if you have a certain volume of solvent, let's say 80 parts per million, what can you do to cheat the system? You can increase the volume of the system. And so depending on the solvent and depending on the peroxide, sometimes the simple solution is to just dilute it down further into a safe range and then deal with disposal.
Now, is that because we're planning on polluting?
No, Lord, no. I don't know what you're talking about.
Come on.
No, never, no. No, never pollution. But you can dilute it to make it safe for transport.
Hey, Randy, you did say 80 parts per million. Is that kind of the threshold as to where we're at? Anything less than 80, we can kind of do this. Anything over 80, I mean, are we looking at more of a hazard?
So 80 is just a good rule of thumb. It's not a hard rule because you can have an explosive mixture with less than 80. Because remember I said there's different classes of peroxide formers. So if you have like a class A peroxide former, you know, the one that wants to just form peroxides no matter what, doesn't even need evaporation, will do it on its own, that one will tend to touch off at a little less than 80. For class B, C, and D, 80 works. But class A's, sometimes they can be so nasty that like really down to 20 would be something that you should be keenly aware of. Anything under 20, fine, all day. But on class A's, 20 is where you start getting sketchy because it could have a localized concentration high enough to actually touch off.
So going, just kind of recapping. Touchy?
Sketchy.
Or explosive? Oh,
both.
Yeah. That's everything. So doing a little bit of recap, Randy, though. Class A, where is that used normally?
Typically lab settings.
Yeah.
Because it's
so you're not going to have that you're not going to have that store bought or even in a general area.
No, you try not to. Like those are things that are super flammable, like ethers, ethyl ethers, super flammable, wants to catch fire all the time. So most ethers, and then there's some vinyl ethers that are class A's, but there's luckily class A is a very short list. I think it's like less than 20 compounds on it. But none of them are really consumer grade. I mean, can you buy an ether as a consumer? Yeah, shit, yeah. You can go out to the hardware store, go buy yourself an ether. Typically, MTBE is an ether, but it's not the type of ether that's going to make a Class A peroxide.
Correct,
so
yeah.
Only one or two types of ethers make that peroxide. So, but yeah, typically you're not going to get a consumer grade. It's going to typically be found in a lab or very niche places in industry. So you're not going to run across it. That's a rare one and more of an oddball.
Yeah.
So yeah. So going down that road some more, man. So you do the visual inspection, neutralization. It's one of those things that you have to be careful with all those steps, right? So because every single one of them has points for failure, and you need to be careful in what you're doing and considering how you want to take care of stuff too. So, but once again, just like anything, like any hazmat thing, you got to size up what you're dealing with, right?
Oh, sure, yeah.
So,
I mean,
So don't send in the old shaky guy to handle this stuff.
no, absolutely not. Yeah, Shaky Joe it'd be his day to do run the rehab tent. Just saying, it would not be a good thing for anybody involved. But
what was I supposed to be doing?
We're like, not this guy. Go take a lap. I think I need this air bottle filled to more than 40. Go. But yeah. So once again, peroxide solid is one of those things you got to be careful, mind your P's and Q's about, because it has the potential to form, unannounced, and if you're not aware of what you're doing, you can really hurt yourself. And what we're gonna have, I think, we're kind of wrapping up this episode. I think what we're gonna do, we have some case studies.
Speaking of hurting yourselves, wow.
Yeah. I think what we're going to do is I think we might actually extend this one out to a third episode because we have a couple good case studies to talk about peroxides and peroxide formers and solids in case studies where things didn't go so great because people weren't paying attention. But I don't think we have enough time left to squeeze all of them in today.
No, unfortunately, I don't. This is going to have to get drug into a third episode.
Yeah.
But it's going to be well worth it.
I would think so. I think
So we're basically going to be talking about the 80 and over class next time, right?
Yes, and it's good to pay attention to these case studies because I think with a couple of them, it was really inadvertent. Like, I don't think they knew what was happening. I think they formed the peroxides as they were doing the test that they were doing, and it turned out really poorly for them. So, but once again, that can happen anywhere, right? Anywhere in industry, too. So you can always form peroxides in anything you're doing, and sometimes that's why inhibitors get added, right? So when we're talking about peroxide formers and peroxides, if you look at your THFs, things like that, or your vinyl chlorides, they are inhibited for a reason, right? So that way they don't get these runaway awful things. And so with THF, you can have things like BHT, or sometimes with other peroxide formers, you actually have it in a base solution. And they help inhibit that growth, so that way you don't run into industrial or laboratory-based accidents. But
I believe we've talked about THCF a couple different times.
THF, yeah.
Not mistaken. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Jeez, what did I say?
You said THF,
yes.
You said THF.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
You said THF.
Like, oh, shoot. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, you're all good. But yeah, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this one a little early because I want to focus on the case studies we have, talk about those because those are good because we want to talk about what they had, what they're using, what happened, and maybe ways to avoid it. So let me put it all like this.
I believe we have some great pictures and maybe a video.
I would hope so, but we'll give it a go.
That's just a teaser.
Yeah, exactly. Stay tuned. More visuals. Dot. But right back, let us know if you wind up using peroxide formers in your industry or your lab space or wherever you work. Let us know maybe what precautions people use in your neck of the woods. If their peroxides are on a routine checklist or you guys do routine testing. Write us. Let us know. But where should they write us, Jeff?
They can write us at hazmatharder@gmail.com.
Beautiful.
Any requests for further episodes, same email. Steve,
Agreed.
I think we already kind of gave it away, but next episode.
I think we'll hit it home with what's better than one episode? Not 2
3 episodes.
But 3
episodes.
Buy 2, get the third one free. Free. So, all right, everybody, stay tuned. Check in for the next episode. It'll be entertaining, much more entertaining than just talking about it, visual inspections.
As always, thank you guys. And until next time, Hazmat Harder.
Hazmat
Has been
harder.
harder.